Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Uh, when we discussed the lecture on the life hereafter, I mentioned that the life hereafter and the reason why it should be there is very convincingly presented by the Quran. But there were certain questions that still remain unanswered, which, if they're not properly addressed, um, you know, there is still some hesitation, some difficulty in understanding, in digesting, in properly getting intellectually convinced about it. One question was that are all non-Muslims, no matter how good they are, they're going to end up in the hell? They're not going to succeed. That is a question that we've already discussed. Another question was regarding if God is the one who decides whom to guide, and He's the one who decides whom to misguide, then what's going on? I mean, why should the people who are misguided be blamed, and why should the people who are guided be given any credit for it, and so on. One important question was, is it true that all Muslims are going to succeed in the hereafter? That is another popular view. And if that's true, then again, the whole question of the life hereafter and it being fair would not really be a very, very convincing understanding. So we're going to take two lectures to look at this question. A serious problem one confronts in properly understanding the concept of life hereafter, the way it is presented by many Muslims, is that believers in the last prophet are seen to be promised ultimate success in the hereafter, no matter how poor their performance might be. Poor in the moral sense, how bad they are, how evil they are, and yet they are convinced that they're going to be successful in the life hereafter. Unless it is shown clearly from the Quran and Hadith that this understanding is incorrect, the concept of life hereafter cannot be claimed to be based on merit. So, if you want to understand that the life hereafter is going to be purely on merit, then it needs to be shown that it's going to be merit-based. Many Muslims believe they have birthright to enter the paradise. To justify their stance, they present some apparently religious arguments. I mean, those arguments are religious in nature. They're from the Quran and Hadith. And therefore, those arguments have got to be looked into to understand whether they are actually saying the same thing as is being claimed by people. They're all Muslims are going to enter the paradise. What are those arguments? Number one, the Prophet ﷺ promised that whoever recites the kalma shall enter the paradise. The second is, he also promised that he would intercede do shafaat for Muslims. He will ask God to forgive his Muslim ummatis, and God will forgive. So he will intercede for them. God is merciful and therefore he will not punish his creatures. That's the third claim. A fourth claim is that God is more concerned about the rights of fellow humans than his own rights. And therefore, if somebody is good to fellow humans, well, he's done the job and there's no need for him to be worried about his life hereafter. Then people say that repentance and good deeds cleanse all sins. That is, if you are saying astaghfirullah, if you're seeking forgiveness from God, that's about it. I mean, it forgives your sins. So you should not be unnecessarily worried about your bad deeds. And finally, it is claimed that good deeds shall outweigh bad deeds on the day of judgment. That is, they're going to be scaled On one side of the scale is going to be the good deeds. On the other is going to be are going to be bad deeds. So if good deeds are going to outweigh bad deeds, well, the person is going to be successful. So what they say is that we do so many good deeds. We say our prayers, we help in making masjid, we say we fast, you know, we do Hajj, Umrah, etc. So many good deeds we do. We help the poor. So if we commit a little bit of a fraud, we tell lies, we do a few things evil, uh, that should not be a reason for us to worry, because at the end of the day, after all, it's going to be weighing of good deeds with bad deeds, and our good deeds are going to be far heavier than our bad deeds. So let's look at these claims. Let's look at the first and perhaps the most important claim: recitation of kalama. Perhaps the most significant and oft mentioned argument presented to support the case of Muslims entering the paradise is that the Prophet ﷺ promised that anyone who recited the kalama shall enter the paradise. Reciting the kalama is also called making shahada, which is, I bear testimony to the fact that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad ﷺ is his servant and messenger. The common understanding of this hadith-based promise is that, unlike the case of non-Muslims, Muslims are guaranteed paradise, the paradise in the hereafter, even if some of them will get the privilege of only after serving their terms in the hell. So that's the understanding. That if you are a Muslim, you have recited the kalama, well, you will enter the paradise. That's the common understanding. I'm sure you must have heard it. Uh, well, even in America, I'm sure people must be talking about it. That if you're a Muslim, you're bound to be successful in the hereafter. So let's look at this claim. The truth is that the question of success in the hereafter is an important subject of the Quran. While mentioning the conditions an individual must satisfy to get guaranteed success in the hereafter, the Quran says, "Wal asri, innal insana lafi khusr." The time is a testimony to the fact that man is indeed going to be destined to loss, to disaster. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, except for those people who believed and did good deeds. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and they exhorted each other to truth, and they exhorted each other, encouraged each other to be steadfast. This short surah is telling us that if you want to be guaranteed of success in the hereafter, if you want to be guaranteed of being rescued from punishment, then you ought to satisfy three conditions. Belief is one of them, good deeds is another, and concern about the environment. You exhort others towards goodness, towards the truth, and you also exhort each other to steadfastness. So all these conditions need to be satisfied in order for an individual to be sure that he or she is going to be rescued from the failure of the next line. So it doesn't just mention faith, it mentions faith plus good deeds plus a concern for the environment. That is, for the moral health of the environment. In other words, according to the Quran, it is not simply the mention of mere recitation of the kalama, but proper belief, good conduct, and an earnest effort to reform the surroundings that would guarantee success for an individual in the hereafter. Another important passage in the Quran that throws light on the question is the following passage that clarifies to Muslims that a mere statement of belief is not good enough for an individual to get success in the hereafter. You just give me 30 seconds and I'll be back. Did it turn out to be more than 30 seconds? It did. I'm sorry about that. Probably I took a full 1 minute. Okay. So what I was saying was that there is another passage in the Quran which is talking about another important aspect of the same problem. The Quran is telling us that the mere statement of belief is not good enough. The Quran says, "Ahasiban nas." Do these people think أن يتركوا, that they're going to be spared, they're going to be left alone? أن يقولوا آمنا, by just saying that they believe, that we believe. وهم لا يفتنون, and they're not going to be tested. وَلَقَدْ فَتَنَّ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ. Indeed, we, that is God is saying we, tested those people who came before them. فَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا. So God is most certainly going to establish, find out those who الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا, who are truthful. That is, whose claim that they believe is truthful. وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْكَاذِبِينَ. And God is most certainly going to find out those who are liars. That is, when you say that you believe, then you are actually offering yourself to be tested. It is as if you've gotten yourself registered. And now the test is going to begin. Another verse, a few verses later, mentions in the same text, وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. And most certainly God is going to find out who are the ones who are believers. وَلَيَعْلَمَنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ. He's most certainly going to find out who are the ones who are hypocrites. That is, if you claim that you are a believer, you are either truly a believer or you are a hypocrite. You either made a correct claim or you are a liar. How is it going to be established? After you go through trials, after you are tested in your character, in your faith, in your commitment. So the Almighty is not giving any guarantee to anyone on the basis of a mere statement that the person believes. A significant aspect of this passage is that it was revealed in the relatively early part of Meccan period when, unlike the Medinan period, there was no worldly temptation to believe in Islam. A person who would decide to accept Islam would do it for genuine reasons. This is only because in accepting Islam, he would expose himself to tribulations inflicted by the leaders of the Meccan clan, the Quraysh. The Quran is clarifying, even then, that it is not possible for an individual to succeed in the eyes of God without going through trials after accepting faith. So, if God is so strongly and firmly mentioning that your mere statement of faith is not acceptable, and I'm going to try you in Mecca, when there was hardly any possibility of hypocrites accepting faith. Just for the sake of it, to deceive, even though they were not convinced. Yet God is saying that people are going to be tested. The Quran tells us that the Jews also believed that they were eligible for the paradise because of their religious affiliations with the chosen people of God. If anyone belonging to their community will end up in the hell, they believed it is going to be only for a short while. Jews had the same belief, they still have the same belief, as many Muslims do, that they are going to be successful in the hereafter no matter what. So Quran says, وَقَالُوا, and they say, لَن تَمَسَّنَا النَّارُ إِلَّا يَامًا مَعْدُودًا. Fire is not going to touch us except for a few days. قُلْ, ask them, أَتَّخَذْتُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ عَهْدًا. Have you had a have you had an understanding with God? Have you had a promise from God, which فَلَنْ يُخْلِفَ اللَّهُ وَعْدَهُ, which God is not going to break? أَمْ تَقُولُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Or are you saying about God something that you don't know? Bala, why not? Man kasaba sayyatan, whoever has committed an evil, wa ahatat bihi khatiyatuhu, and his evil has overwhelmed him, surrounded him. Faulaika ashabun nar. And these are the people who are going to dwell in the fire. Hum fiha khalidun. They're going to reside there forever. That is, it's not going to be a matter of a few days. It's going to be forever for the people who do something wrong and then it just overwhelms them. What does it mean? What it means is that, when you do something wrong, you correct yourself, you say sorry to the Almighty, it's over, it's cleansed. But if you say something to God, if you do something wrong, and you're not even bothered about it, you don't have any remorse, you don't feel any regrets inside you, and you continue to do that evil over and over again, there comes a time when the evil just overwhelms you, and your character is gone, your faith is gone. You don't even feel anything bad when you do wrong things, etc. So the Almighty says, no matter who you are, Jew, Muslim, or whatever, if you do something wrong and you start leading a life where your evil overcomes you, overwhelms you, just takes over you, then forget about any possibility of you being forgiven. So here again, the Almighty is actually mentioning very clearly that it's not just mere faith, but it's your conduct, it's your performance that really matters. The Quran tells us that the hypocrites used to recite the kalama and yet were declared as liars by God. إِذَا جَاءَكَ الْمُنَافِقُونَ, when hypocrites come to you, O Prophet, قَالُوا نَشْهَدُ إِنَّكَ لَرَسُولُ اللَّهِ, they say, we bear witness to the fact that you are God's messenger. وَاللَّهُ يَعْلَمُ إِنَّكَ لَرَسُولُ, God knows that you are his messenger. وَاللَّهُ يَشْهَدُ إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ لَكَاذِبُونَ, God testifies the fact that the hypocrites are liars. Hadith literature clarifies the fact that one would enter the paradise on the mere act of reciting the kalama is not as simple a matter as some people believe it is. As I said earlier, the Quran is absolutely clear that you cannot enter the paradise without performing well. This misunderstanding that you will get paradise simply by reciting the kalama is primarily hadith based. So let's have a look at the hadiths which are claimed to be making that understanding. So the first of these ahadith is in, I guess it's in Muslim, yeah. It is narrated by Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu. He's one of those companions who stayed very close with the Prophet towards the last few years of his life. So he narrates the ahadith more than anybody else. He says, I went out to look for the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, and came to a garden where God's messenger was. He addressed me as Abu Huraira and gave me his sandals and said, take away these sandals of mine, and when you meet someone outside this garden who testifies that there is no God but God, being fully convinced of it in his heart, give him the good news that he shall enter the paradise. Uh, the first one I met, Abu Huraira says, was Umar radiallahu anhu. He asked, what are these sandals, Abu Huraira? I replied, these are sandals of the Prophet, Messenger of God, with which he has sent me to give good news to the one I meet, who testifies that there is no God but God, being fully convinced of it in his heart, that he will go to the paradise. Thereupon Umar struck me on the breast, and I fell on my back. He then said, go back, Abu Hurairah. So I returned to the Messenger of God, peace be upon him, and I was about to burst into tears. Upon this, the Messenger of God said, what prompted you to do this, Umar? He said, Messenger of God, my mother and father be sacrificed for you. Did you send Abu Hurairah with your sandals, asking him to give the good news to anyone who he met, who testifies that there is no God but God, being fully convinced of it in his heart, that he shall enter the paradise? He said, yes. Umar said, please do not do it, for I am afraid that people will trust in it alone. Let them go on doing good deeds. The Messenger of God said, well, then leave them to practice. So, here is an interesting story where it seems that there was something similar to the fact that whoever says the kalama with a complete conviction in his heart, he'll enter the paradise. And Umar was not very convinced that this statement should be promoted to the ordinary Muslims. And the Prophet agreed. There is another hadith that has been narrated by Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu that says, the Prophet ﷺ said to Muaz, there is no servant of God who testifies that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is a servant and messenger, except that God has made the fire prohibited for him. He, Muaz, said, O Messenger of God, should I not inform people about it so that they might get the delight of the good news? He replied, no. But in that case, they might rely on it. Muaz informed people about it only at the time of his death to avoid the sin of not informing the people. So the same thing the Prophet mentioned to Muaz as well, and did not allow Muaz to share it with others. But Muaz shared it with others at the time of his death. Probably he had forgotten that he had promised the Prophet that he's not going to share it with others. Well, that's human. It happens. You tend to forget a few things. More particularly, I mean, if somebody is on the deathbed, it's not surprising that the individual may not have everything in his mind that needs to be concerned about. But there is another hadith which we must never forget. The mention of faith in one's heart in a way that one is fully convinced about it should be understood in the light of the following hadith. The one who sees an evil, he should correct it with his hands. If that is not possible, then he should correct it with his tongue. If that too is not possible, then he should condemn it in his heart. And that is the weakest part of faith. So that's another hadith. The reason seems to be, why did the Prophet mention the fact that the one who recited the kalama shall enter the paradise? The reason seems to be that it was a part of his duty to be a mubashir, Rashid, the one who gives good news to the people, to let people know that if they are sincere in their commitment to God, they must never lose hope. Even if they are overcome by Satan for a while, their true faith will bring them out of the influence of evil. They must therefore keep trying. So it seems that in his capacity as Mubashir, the one who gives good news, the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, he mentioned this fact to his some of his companions, so that they should never ever lose hope. The Quran says, Ya ayyuhan Nabi, O Prophet, inna arsalnaka shahidan. We have sent you as a witness, Mubashir, and as a bearer of good news, wa nazira, and as a warner. So, as a bearer of good news, he was, expected to give the good news to the believers that even if they do certain things wrong in life, if they have belief in their heart, their belief is most certainly going to come to their rescue and will not allow them to continue to do evil. That is, if you are a believer, your belief will help you in overcoming evil. It wasn't meant to give a license to people to do evil. It was a statement meant to help people understand that even if they're doing things wrong, if they are true believers, then they must continue with the fight and should not allow evil to overcome them and to make them completely desperate, lose hope. They should not lose hope. They should continue to struggle and strive to revive their faith and to start doing good deeds again, even if for a while they have been overcome by evil. So that's a good news that the Prophet gave, but there were people who actually took it in the wrong sense. Now, intercession. Before intercession, another small break for me to drink water. Hot here, hot. Yes, yes. So the first claim of some people that if they are Muslims, they're going to succeed no matter what, was the kalima, recitation of the kalima. Now we come to the second claim, which was, if you could kindly recall, intercession. Another important argument supporting the claim that Muslims are eventually going to enter the paradise without doubt is the understanding that the Prophet ﷺ will intercede to shafaat for Muslims before God on Judgment Day, which will enable them to enter the paradise despite their undeserving worldly performance. Now, obviously, again, we've got to see the Quran first. Has the Quran said anything about intercession? Perhaps the clearest statement about intercession has been made in the Quran in the following verse, which is addressing the Jews. The Jews, on account of being the children of prophets, believed that they will be saved from the punishment of the next life because of the intercession of their ancestors. The Quran says, "Wattaqu yawman," and fear the day, "La tajzi nafsun an nafsin shay'a," and no soul shall be able to come to the rescue of another at all. وَلَا يُقْبَلُ مِنْهَا شَفَاعَةٌ, and no intercession shall be accepted on his behalf. وَلَا يُؤْخَذُ مِنْهَا عَدْلٌ, and no ransom shall be taken from them for them. وَلَا هُمْ يُنْصَرُونَ, and no help shall be given. The same thing has been repeated in the other two verses that have been referred to. The verse with slight modification, this verse with slight modification has been repeated twice in the surah, once addressing the Jews, again and once addressing Muslims. So, however, the Quran does indicate some possibility of intercession. In the famous verse that is known as Ayatul Kursi, Man zallazi yashfa'u indahu illa bi'izni. Who can intercede with him without his permission? In other words, in Ayatul Kursi, which incidentally is the very next verse after verse 254. You see, in verse 254, which is addressing Muslims, the Almighty says, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, believers, anfiqu mimma razaqnakum, spend from what we have given you as sustenance, min qabli an ya'tiya yawmun, before there comes a day, la bay'un fihi, when there is not going to be any trade, wala khullatun, nor any friendship, wala shafa, nor any intercession that is going to come to your rescue. Wal kafiruna hum zalimun, and those who are rejectors of faith are the ones who are unfair. They're being unfair to themselves. However, as I said, the Quran does mention in the very next verse, which is Ayatul Kursi, some possibility of intercession. Man zallazi yashfa'u indahu illa bi'izni. Who can intercede with him without his permission? In other words, some intercession is going to be there, but not without God's permission. Obviously, there can be no conflict in one passage of the Quran with another. The Quran claims one of the reasons why it needs to be acknowledged that it is God's word is the fact that there are no contradictions in the Quran. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. Do they not ponder over the Quran? وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ. Had it been from anyone other than God, لَبَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. They would have found therein lots of contradictions, discrepancies. So, the Quran says that there are no contradictions in the Quran. The Quran says there is going to be no intercession. The Quran says that some intercession is going to be there, but it's going to be only by the permission of God. So we need to understand why these two statements are not contradicting each other. Because the Quran says that there's nothing in the Quran that contradicts with what the Almighty says in the Quran elsewhere. It needs to be understood as to what is meant by the fact that there shall be no intercession on Judgment Day at all, and there is going to be some intercession. There is another relevant passage of the Quran that clarifies that on the Judgment Day, God is not going to allow anyone to speak. If at all anyone shall be permitted, he will speak only the truth. يَوْمَ يَقُومُ الرُّوحُ وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ صَفًّا لَا يَتَكَلَّمُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَذِنَ لَهُ الرَّحْمَنُ فَقَالَ الصَّوَابَ. The Almighty is saying that, think of the day when the Spirit, that is Jibreel, the Holy Spirit, and the angels are going to stand in rows, saffan, la yatakallamun. Nobody is going to be allowed to speak, illa, except man azina lahu rahman, whom Rahman is going to permit, faqala sawaba, and he is going to speak only what the truth is. He will speak what is right. So the Almighty is mentioning here in this verse that on the day of judgment, even the angels are going to stand in rows, they'll be still, they'll not be able to speak. The reason why it's mentioned over here is that the people of Makkah had this belief that angels were the daughters of God, and they are going to intercede for them. And even if they will be found guilty of big crimes, these daughters of God are going to be they're so close to God. God is so fond of them that he's not going to say no to their request, their plea. So the Almighty is mentioned over here. Forget about that possibility, because on the day of judgment, nobody is going to be allowed to speak except for the one whom God is going to allow, and what he'll speak is going to be the truth. Likewise, the Quran clarifies that intercession will benefit on that day only the one whom God will choose to be allowed to benefit. وَلَا تَنْفَعُ الشَّفَاعَةُ عِنْدَهُ إِلَّا لِمَنْ أَذِنَ لَهُ. No intercession is going to benefit anyone except the one for whom God is going to permit. God is going to give permission for him to be interceded for. Conclusion. Keeping the above explanation of the Quran in view, the following picture seems to emerge. There will be many people who will deserve to succeed in the hereafter because of their good performance. Many others will deserve to be doomed for failure because of their poor performance. There will be some who, even though won't qualify to succeed clearly, but they won't be clearly failing either. They will be on the margin. God, out of His mercy, shall decide for them to also succeed through the process of intercession. In our good old days, when we used to study, whether it was metric 10th class or inter 12th or BA, 14th year of study, we would be examined, and each paper will mention that if you have bagged 40% marks or more, you are passed. If you get 33% or less, you failed. But anything between 33 to 40, you're eligible to get grace marks. So if you have managed to get 33 or more, but less than 40, then it is at the discretion of the teacher, the examiner, to pass you out of mercy, out of her grace. So it seems that there's going to be some such arrangement in God's system as well. Out of His mercy, God shall decide for them to also succeed those who will be between 33 to 40 in my example. So He will allow some outstanding human beings to intercede for such people. This will give such chosen people a very special position of privilege before the entire humanity. Since this intercession will be allowed in favor of those who will be on the margin and therefore would deserve God's mercy, such intercession would not negate the basic principle mentioned in verses 248, 123, and 254. That there shall be no intercession on the judgment day. The negation of intercession in these verses is for the people who would not deserve to be interceded for. It's not really meant for, it's something that applies to the people in my example who have marks less than 33%. No intercession is going to be allowed to them. That's what seems to be the Quranic stance. Now let's look at some of the ahadith, which really have been the reason why many people believe that they're going to be interceded for. There is a hadith which says, the Prophet said, I will be your predecessor at the font of Kauthar, and some men amongst you will be brought to me, and when I will try to hand them some water, they will be pulled away from me by force. Whereupon I will say, O Lord, my companions, The Almighty will say, you do not know what they did after you left. They introduced new things into the religion after you. So they don't deserve to be given the privilege of you giving them water, helping them out with quenching their thirst on the day of judgment. So what it means is that even on the day of judgment, there are some people who will qualify to benefit from the Prophet's uh, mercy, God's mercy bestowed upon the Prophet when he would uh, offer water to the people who followed him. But some of them are going to be found not deserving. In another hadith, the Prophet says, I will raise my head and praise God with saying, He will teach me, and then I will intercede. He will fix a limit for me to intercede for whom I will admit into the paradise. Uh, then I will come back again to God. And when I see my Lord, the same thing will happen to me. And then I'll intercede, and God will fix a limit for me to intercede whom I will. I will let into the paradise. Then I'll come back for the third time. And then I will come back for the fourth time and will say, none remains in hell but those whom the Quran has imprisoned in hell and who have not have been destined to an eternal stay in hell. In other words, uh, in hadith, what you get is an understanding whereby the Prophet is going to intercede for, so long as the Almighty is going to allow him to intercede for people. And for such people, as I've mentioned already, about whom the Almighty is going to permit him, and he will come 3 times and take away a few people. By the way, those few people, is very likely that they too will be in the hell. But the Almighty's mercy is going to allow them to come out of the hell, the punishment of hell, by or through the process of intercession that is going to come from the Prophet. God is going to allow him to intercede for such people, and that intercession is going to come to their rescue, but not for everyone. There are going to be people who will not be allowed to be interceded for, because they'll be held to not be taken out of the hell because of the Quran. The Quran has given clear mention that there are certain categories of people who will not be allowed to get God's mercy. They'll not be permitted to be forgiven. There's another hadith that says the Prophet ﷺ said on the day of resurrection, camels will come to their owner in the best state of health they have ever had in the world. And if he had not paid their zakat in the world, then they would tread him with their feet. And similarly, sheep will come to their owner in the best state of health they will have. And they have ever had in the world. And if he had not paid their zakat, then they would tread him with their hooves and would butt him with their horns. The Prophet ﷺ said one of their claims when they were rights is that they should be milked while water is kept in front of them. The Prophet added, I do not want any one of you to come to me on the day of resurrection carrying over his neck a sheep that will be bleating. Such a person will then say, O Muhammad, please intercede for me. I will say to him, I can't help you, for I conveyed God's message to you. Similarly, I do not want any one of you to come to me carrying over his neck a camel that will be grunting. Such a person then will say, "Oh Muhammad, please intercede for me." I will say to him, I can't help you, for I conveyed God's message to you. In other words, as I mentioned earlier, the question of intercession coming to the rescue of Muslims is not a simple matter. It's something that is going to be merit based again. Not everybody is going to get the privilege of intercession. Only those who achieved a certain level uh, of performance in the eyes of the Almighty, that they are going to get the privilege of being interceded for. Uh, but that also means that such people are very likely to first be punished and then they are going to be taken away by the messenger of God who will intercede for them and they will be they will be taken away. Uh, this particular explanation also clarifies that what we what we read right at the beginning, fear the day when no soul shall come to the rescue of another at all, and no intercession is going to be accepted on his behalf. Now, this statement is not negated when we are talking about the intercession that is there in Hadith and the possibility of intercession that is there in the Quran, in Ayatul Kursi, for example, because the negation of any possibility of intercession in this verse and the next two verses is for the people who will not qualify to be interceded for, who will not be the ones who will have any chance of, uh, of getting the mercy of the Almighty. So the statement of the Quran is absolutely clear, and it doesn't uh, contradict or conflict with any other statements. The rest of the Quran is also consistent. As I said, there is going to be a margin from, in my example, 33% to 40%. Somebody achieved that margin. He, she too, uh, well, they're going to get the privilege of intercession, but not everybody. With that, uh, with that kind of explanation, one thing is clear. Uh, the kind of prayer that some people make, like you know, like uh, they pray for the intercession to come to their rescue. They ask God Almighty to enable them to get the uh, the intercession of the Prophet on the Day of Judgment. This prayer is not is not something that really a believer should be making. I mean, if you are asking God now that you want the Prophet's intercession to come to your rescue, then what you're actually doing is that you are telling God that I should not pass clearly. I should not get 40% or more. My marks should be below 40%, but above 33%. That's not a very good thing to ask for. Why should we not ask the Almighty to enable us to pass with flying colors? Why should we not tell Him that we would like to do as best as is possible to be able to succeed with very high marks and very high grades? I mean, we strive to get better grades as better as well as good as possible in our courses that we take in the universities, the colleges, schools in this life. Why would we not strive for a higher level of success in the next life, which is going to last forever, which is the life that matters? Here, really, it hardly matters whether you get high or low grade. Well, it matters, but not quite as much. So, the whole understanding about kalama, that we're going to recite, if we recite the kalama, we're going to enter the paradise, and then the intercession of the Prophet, may God mercy be on him, is going to come to a rescue. It really has been badly misunderstood. And that has actually caused people to form opinions and understandings that has uh, caused many Muslims to not be serious about their life hereafter, to not make an earnest attempt to perform as best as they can to succeed in the next life. So I have tried to explain in this particular lecture that the basis of this understanding that Muslims are going to succeed in the hereafter, no matter what, if they have, if they have belong to a Muslim family, well, that's about it. I've tried to explain through the Quran as well as through Hadith that this understanding is not based on Quran, nor is it based on Hadith. In actual fact, this understanding is based on an incorrect reading, an incorrect interpretation of the Quran and Hadith. So if you go through the Quran and you understand Hadith in the light of the Quran, well, you would know that what the Quran is saying is very different from what many Muslims are imagining and assuming. So let's have any questions if there are any. We have 5 minutes to go. I hope what I have mentioned you've understood. Now is the time for you to ask questions, if there are any. Are there any questions? Have you understood what I've said? Have you? Well, if you understood what I've said, it's great. But in order for certain concepts to be clarified, uh, there are certain reservations, certain clarifications that are always needed to be provided. But if you think that the presentation was clear enough for you to understand uh, what I wanted to convey, that's not a bad message. I hope you are following all the lectures that we are delivering to you. And if at some point we examine you, I'm sure you will all do well. You will pass with flying colors. You will get more than 40% marks, and there will be no need for any decision, any grace marks to come to your rescue. Okay, if there are no questions, then we can stop here and we'll meet next time, inshallah. Right? Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. What do I do? Sign in, sign off. What about sign off? People go. How do I leave? End meeting. Yeah, very good.